This is yet another story of how Black success led to deadly consequences. This is a stark reminder that Black progress and prosperity have often been met with violence and brutality. This story does not have a happy ending, but it must be told anyway, because this is a story of what Black life was, and still is in this country. Black resistance to racial oppression often led to brutal retaliation from the white population. In states like Mississippi and South Carolina, landlord-tenant relationships were fraught with racial conflict. Most Black lynching victims were agricultural workers who refused to succumb to the injustice and Jim Crow laws of the day. These workers regularly challenged the actions of their white oppressors, and when a Black person prevailed in the dispute against a white person, the white population sometimes responded with lynching that Black person as a way to send a message to other Black people who dared to stand up for themselves. Black individuals who achieved economic prosperity or social prominence were particularly vulnerable to lynching. Successful Black people were often targeted and lynched for maintaining their dignity in the face of Jim Crow and equality, as their achievements were seen as a challenge to the white-dominated social order. The desire to keep Black people in their place was the driving force behind many lynchings of that era. The success and the assertiveness of Black people threatened the racial hierarchies that whites often sought to preserve, leading to violent and deadly outcomes for Black people. Anthony P. Crawford was born around 1865, during the Reconstruction era, a time of both hope and struggle for newly freed Black people. Anthony's father owned a modest cotton farm along the Little River, which Anthony later inherited. From a young age, he showed a fierce determination to rise above the constraints imposed on him by Jim Crow and segregation. Born free, Anthony spent most of his early years working and attending school. By his 20s, his hard work had finally begun to pay off. In 1883, he purchased nearly 200 acres of prime cotton land for $830. Over the years, he expanded his farm to over 400 acres. His success was not just a personal triumph, but also a beacon of hope and pride for the Black community in Abbeville. By 1916, his estate was valued at an impressive $25,000, equivalent to nearly $1 million today. Anthony was not just content with personal success alone, though. He was a pillar of the Black community. He served as the chief benefactor and secretary of his local AME church. His self-assured demeanor and material success convinced him that he was just as good as any white man, and even superior to them. This was something that did not sit well with many in the white community where he lived. Anthony also had a very large family, with 16 children. He ensured that his children received the best education possible, with some of them attending college. He also made sure that they all had their own farms in close proximity to his land. He created a tight-knit, prosperous Black family clan that stood in an area defined by the subjugation of Black people. He even co-founded the Industrial Union of Abbeville County to promote the advancement and success of Black people, further cementing his role as a community leader. The success and confidence that Anthony's family exuded put them on an inevitable path that will lead to tensions with the white community. In one notable incident, 4 of Anthony's sons were convicted of aggravated assault following an altercation with a white man named James Rogers. Although they avoided jail time by paying a hefty fine, the incident left a lingering animosity toward the Crawford family. Despite these hostilities, Anthony continued to assert his rights and maintain his dignity. However, the racial climate in Abbeville was becoming increasingly hostile. In March of 1910, whites burned the local Black college to the ground, resulting in the deaths of 3 students. A few years later, a Black youth was castrated by a mob for allegedly looking at a white woman the wrong way. The atmosphere was charged with violence and a deep-seated desire to maintain white rule at all costs. On October 21, 1916, Anthony brought 2 loads of cotton and a load of cottonseed into town. A disagreement over the price of cottonseed with a white merchant named W.D. Barksdale quickly escalated. Anthony, being a shrewd businessman, knew the going price for the cottonseed and refused to accept less than what it was worth. When Barksdale offered a lower price, Anthony rejected it, leading to a heated exchange between the two of them. Barksdale called Anthony a liar, and Anthony reacted angrily, accusing Barksdale of trying to cheat him. The situation escalated further. Barksdale's clerks armed themselves with axe handles and tried to attack Anthony. Although Anthony managed to fend them off, the confrontation caught the attention of the sheriff, a man named R.M. Burtz, who arrested Anthony supposedly to protect him from the crowd. While Anthony was arranging his bail, Barksdale encouraged local troublemakers to try to come and teach Anthony a lesson for his defiance. As Anthony headed back to the cotton gin, a mob led by McKinney Cann chased after him. Realizing that he was in serious danger, Anthony hid in the cotton gin's boiler room and grabbed a hammer for protection. When Cann entered the room, Anthony hit him with the hammer, seriously injuring him. In response, the mob brutally beat Anthony unconscious and dragged him through the streets for everyone to see. Sheriff Burks managed to temporarily break up the mob and took Anthony to the county jail. However, the mob was still furious. Rumors that Anthony might be moved out of the county made them even angrier. Later that afternoon, the mob stormed the jail and overpowered the sheriff and dragged Anthony back into the streets. The mob brutally attacked Anthony and kicked him and beat him and stabbed him as they paraded his bloody body throughout the town. They eventually took Anthony to the fairgrounds, where they hanged him and fired at his body countless times. The coroner's jury, which included people involved in the lynching, claimed that Anthony's life had been taken by parties unknown. The lynching of Anthony Crawford had a huge impact on Abbeville's black community. Many black families quickly left the area, abandoning their homes and their jobs to escape the violence. This migration was a part of the broader Great Migration, where African Americans moved to the north in search of better jobs and safety, especially during and after World War I. This shift disrupted the South's reliance on black labor, cheap black labor in fact. White South Carolinians reacted in different ways to this migration, ranging from economic panic to calls for reform. The economic impact on the white community was significant. African Americans boycotted the local white businesses and caused a noticeable decline in trade. The loss of black labor and the boycott led some white businessmen to publicly condemn the mob's actions and what happened to Anthony Crawford. Despite the public outrage, though, justice for Anthony and his family was never served. The people responsible for lynching Anthony were never punished, highlighting the deep-rooted racism in the legal system at that time for black people. The white residents of Abbeville got together and decided that they were going to force the Crawford family to leave. They seized Anthony Crawford's family's land and his property. The governor at the time, a man named Coleman Livingston Blees, a man known for his segregationist views and his policies, said that he couldn't protect the Crawford family. Without any protection, most of the Crawfords left the South, moving far away to states like New York and Illinois, breaking up their close-knit family that they had once had there. Years went by, but people did not forget about Anthony P. Crawford. His family kept his story alive through the reunions and the efforts of older relatives. His great-great-granddaughter, Doria Johnson, born in Chicago 45 years after the lynching, played a big role in remembering him. As a young woman, Doria contacted the Abbeville church where Anthony had once served and been the leader. This led her to find cousins and other relatives that she had not known about, and sparked a movement to publicly honor Anthony's legacy. In October 2016, a large crowd, including Anthony's descendants from all over the country, gathered to unveil a historical marker in Abbeville. The marker featured Anthony's photograph, and it stands as a reminder of the racial terror that he faced and the lasting strength of his legacy. Brian Stevenson, the director of the Equal Justice Initiative, led the ceremony and said that for a long time the earth has been silent about the injury and injustice of what happened to Anthony Crawford, but today we're going to resurrect that truth. The crowd responded by chanting, "We are here," which echoed throughout the entire town square. The soil collected from the lynching site, the stories shared, and the historical marker serve as a lasting tribute to Anthony P. Crawford and what his life and death meant. Even though they no longer take our land and run us out of town, they found new ways to accomplish the same goals. Now they use mass incarceration and housing discrimination and voter suppression and economic and employment disparities. So the next time you drive through a black neighborhood and you see poverty and neglect, or when the conversation comes up about black home ownership and generational wealth, just know that black people were intentionally locked out of this. We don't lack these things because we don't want them. We lack them because there were barriers that were put in place to prevent us from getting them. And when we did have wealth and were trying to build more wealth, it was stolen from us. What happened to Anthony P. Crawford is not just a story from the past. It's a reflection of the systemic oppression that still exists today. From redlining to predatory housing practices, from the school-to-prison pipeline to healthcare disparities, the fight for equality must go on. These injustices are modern-day manifestations of the same racial terror that claimed Anthony P. Crawford's life. I want to know what you think about this video. Had you ever heard of Anthony Crawford, and how does it make you feel learning about what happened to him and what happened to his family? And what can we do today to ensure that stories like this are not repeated? Drop me a comment down below and let me know what you think.